All right, a big night in the race for the White House. The Republican frontrunner, Donald Trump, racking up 3 more wins in Mississippi, Hawaii, and the crown jewel of the night, Michigan. And Bernie Sanders rolling to a surprise victory in Michigan, where many polls showed that Hillary Clinton was leading by double digits. At a press conference last night from one of his golf resorts in Florida, the Donald had this message for those members of the GOP establishment who remain bitterly opposed to his candidacy.
Yeah, I say let's come together, folks. We're going to win. I say let's come together. Carl, the answer is not 100%, but largely I would say yes. You know, some people you're just not going to get along with it. It's okay. But largely I would like to do that. And believe it or not, I am a unifier. I unify. I mean, you look at all of the things I built all over the world. I'm a unifier. I get along with people.
In the meantime, Ted Cruz able to chalk up a win in Idaho. But it was a bad night for Marco Rubio and John Kasich. In fact, it was so bad for Rubio that so far he has failed to qualify for a single delegate in all 4 states that are up for grabs. This reportedly prompting Rubio's advisors into some tough conversations, including whether he should drop out before Florida to avoid an embarrassing loss. Now, Rubio denied a similar report yesterday. We're going to get to Rubio in a second, David, but first on the point about Donald Trump. Resounding, definitive win.
Right.
He won with evangelicals in Mississippi.
He
won with Reagan Democrats in Michigan. Such a dichotomy, but he seems to be capturing both of them.
He does, and I'd like to focus on the second one, because the Reagan Democrats, we haven't seen Reagan Democrats since Reagan, really. I mean, George W. brought a few of them over when he was elected in 2000, but not like the Donald is doing. And the Republican Party would be crazy not to recognize the power of that. Does anybody believe that Ted Cruz, who's a hardline conservative, he's got a lot of good support in the conservative community, but does anybody believe that he would bring over any moderate Democrats as crossovers to the Republican Party? I don't think so. By the way, Donald, I love how he says, I'm a unifier in his speech. I said, at the same time, did you notice he was serving the Trump steaks with Trump water and Trump wine? A direct in-your-face to the establishment that was questioning whether he had failures in those areas?
Yeah, you know, Howard Kurtz, who also works here at the Fox News channel, Sandra, said it was, you know, one part political speech, but also like a QVC appearance. And I'm sitting at home thinking, you know what? Americans like QVC. I happen to love QVC. I like steaks and boxes.
And they like capitalism, and that really pushes in the face of voters something that they love about Donald Trump, and that he is a businessman, and he has taken advantage of all the strengths of this country. I wanted to talk about the field for a second. When you do look down at the night that Marco Rubio and John Kasich had, in Michigan, when you look at those late deciding voters, this was really interesting when the exit polls started coming out. 4 out of 10 voters in the Michigan Republican primary said that they had made up their minds in the past week. That's astounding to me. 40% of voters were undecided a week ago and made their decision. And that really benefited John Kasich the most. He picked up 35% of their vote. Ted Cruz, 31%. Donald Trump only got 18% of those late deciding Republican voters. What does that tell you?
Well, Kasich was, in the beginning, by the way, we were reporting it on FBN. I was with Neil Cavuto, and it looked like Kasich was in the lead in the very beginning. Of course, he came out second. But and it is, Michigan is right on top of Ohio, so there's a lot of crossovers between the state. But it shows you that people just don't know. They really, so I think some people are instinctively drawn to Trump. They love the fact that he doesn't have a politically correct filter at all. They're sick and tired of having somebody point their finger at him for saying something that's politically incorrect. They love the fact he's talking. But they have some concerns. They're concerned about what he says on trade. They're concerned about some contradictions in his own lifestyle. You know, the fact that he does outsource a lot of his products while at the same time condemning others for doing the same. And so there is a lot of concern there.
On Twitter last night, Harris, I saw some people floating the idea of maybe a Trump-Kasich ticket, a deal that could be done. But he also said this. He said of his remaining rivals, they're pretty much all gone, and dismissed any threat of competition from even a Ted Cruz. Is he right?
Well, he went down the recent history of what happened when they were at 17 and now they're at 4. And I thought that was really interesting, because what he was doing was not only drawing attention to where he's been, but where the country has been. He says, you know, he's tried to be forward-looking. We always say, well, why is he in Maine and why is he going to Florida now, but the primaries in New Hampshire? What's going on? He's in South Carolina, but he's not in the right state. But he's doing it again. Last night there was a baseball player who was a retired baseball player who was in the audience, and he said, "Oh, and you're from Ohio. I love Ohio," and because that was tipping his hat toward Kasich, letting you know I'm coming there next. So I give him credit for doing that. The big question mark, though, goes back to something that Sandra was saying. If most of the country, and we know statistically people like to decide late, if those late deciders are not breaking toward Trump, where are they going? And as more people get out of the race, what does that mean? Are those people just dissatisfied and they won't be voting?
Can I just pick up on one thing you said? Forgive me, Andrea, but the thing that Trump did last night by pointing to the baseball player is something you'd never see Cruz do. Cruz has not yet learned to play the crowd the way the Donald does. The Donald, of course, has decades of experience doing it, but Cruz has that.
Yankee and a Senator Cruz, would you see him calling out Jack Nicklaus? Would you see him talking about the people who've wanted his golf course?
But he has this personability, Trump does, that Cruz doesn't.
And he has this ability, and he said this last night, Julie. He said, hostility just doesn't work for some people, meaning he can be hostile, but others can't, and by that he meant Marco Rubio. And I want you to focus on Rubio because not one delegate last night. Let's look ahead to Florida. Look at this poll, this Florida poll. Trump is now beating Marco Rubio 40% to 24%. In the Sunshine State. A lot of talk about Rubio having to drop out at this point because he hasn't racked up one delegate, but his hostility towards Trump, that didn't work.
Yeah, and you know, you and I talked about this last week or a few weeks ago. We all talked about this on the couch, which is you can only be true to yourself. You cannot run pretending to be somebody else. Marco Rubio tried to out-Trump Trump. Can't do it. There's only one Donald Trump. Marco Rubio's appeal, as it were, I don't see that he has much of an appeal left, but it was that he was this young guy who was sort of this up-and-comer, demographically appealing to the Republican Party, presentable. He got down in the gutter. He's the one.
Was that the beginning of the end?
That was 100% the beginning of the end.
The Don Rickles routine.
Yeah, it was just.
And he knows.
It was just a crazy thing to do, and it was completely contrary to what he's always stood for. And by the way, that's not just a former baseball player. That's Paul O'Neill, the great '96 Yankees.
Yeah, forgive me for not knowing, because I mean, I didn't know who he was, and we never got to see him because the cameras didn't flip.
Right.
So, but I figured other people would know what we were talking about. Okay, so as we move toward Florida, it's winner take all. It's 99 delegates.
Right.
Pretty much a good night for Marco Rubio, or maybe not.
It's got to be. I'll tell you this.
If he doesn't win.
Well, so I'm of the opinion that Marco Rubio is doing one of two things. Either he's trying to win Florida, which still won't be enough. It's only 99 delegates. It's not going to be nearly enough to get to where he needs to get. Either he's doing this to deprive Trump of a convention win, whereas he wants a broker convention, and if enough people split, Trump won't be able to get it. But I'll tell you, for his personal career, why would he do this? Get out now. Don't embarrass yourself in your home state if you lose. You can come back. You can run for governor. He's done. If he loses Florida, he's finished in his home state. He cannot come back from this and eventually run for governor.
And the establishment is already moving to Cruz.
Of course.
I mean, he got Neil Bush.
Why are they
for
skipping over John Kasich? Any thoughts on that?
He's not getting the delegates.
Yeah, he's not mathematically.
But he's not gotten down into that mud. He hasn't done that. In fact, you and I watch social media a lot during these big primary events. He's not doing that. So does that not resonate if you're not?
No, I mean,
Cruz
is the one that had the momentum over the weekend. Donald Trump stopped that momentum. Marco Rubio, it's clear he's getting bad advice. I mean, that was bad advice to not be authentic, whatever his consultants gave him, to do that Don Rickles routine. Now, who knows what advice he's getting. But I do see this shaping up as a bit of a gender war. Last night I heard a lot of analysts saying, Trump needs to win women. And you know that Hillary Clinton's going to make this all about women. Men are breaking for Trump. Are we on the verge of one big national American
Fiorina on the stage
war?
for Ted Cruz a couple hours ago live here on Fox.
I just think we're going to be talking about men versus women if it's Trump.
But Hillary's losing the women's vote.
No, she's not.
One massive, well, if she gets the
She's getting less than she thought she was.
I'm calling it men versus women. Watch it. It's going to be ugly.